Hey, it's Mike with Aegis Defense Solutions. Welcome back to the Modern Sportsman, and we're going to do a little fun video tonight, and we're going to compare a couple handguns. Well, the reason I'm doing this is because I got some fair criticism on one of my videos where we reviewed the Echelon from Springfield, the Croatian import that they've recently started bringing in which basically they've been copying the homework of the SIG P320 line and what SIG's been doing with modular componentry in their handgun. Now, I think the criticism that I've been getting about the Echelon and what I said about it is probably actually fair and warranted, mainly because the last few times that I've been here, not doing any recording or anything, I've taken the Echelon out with a few other guys and actually did some more firing with it. And I'll be honest with you, it's starting to grow on. Now, I still think some of my criticisms with the Echelon still hold up. I didn't care for the reset on the trigger pull. It's very, very light, and I don't care for it that much. The trigger pull overall, though, I think is actually crisp out of the box. It is better than a Glock trigger, and it's better than a SIG trigger, and I absolutely detest SIG triggers. So, and one thing I do want to add is that I'm not beholden to any one company. I don't, I think any person that does an adequate amount of training should be able to pick up any firearm, any handgun, and operate that thing with some level of proficiency where they're not a soup sandwich. So I don't call myself a SIG fanboy. I don't call myself a Glock fanboy. If I can pick it up, I rock it, and I like it, I'll use it. I'm pretty simple as far as that goes. But what we're going to do tonight is that we're going to compare the Echelon against its main competitor, which I believe that this is a direct competition. And that main competitor is going to be SIG, and we're going to be looking at the SIG P320. So tonight, the SIG P320 versus the Echelon. We're going to see who comes out on top, as far as my personal opinions are concerned, for that matter. So let's dive into it. But before we dive in depth into the Echelon, we should look and give a fair shake to its competitor. Now, I've said it before, I don't care for SIG's triggers on them. I think they feel like sponge cake in my hand. And the one we're going to be looking at and comparing it tonight is a Legion model of the P320. Now, the U.S. military moved over to SIG during a contract fight between Glock, SIG, and honestly, I can't remember the other companies, but those were the main two, the Glock 19X and SIG's M17 and the M18 line. Ultimately, they went with SIG, and the big attractive part for SIG and what the military wanted were the modular trigger control group inside of that. And the big reason for that is that, one, it's a huge relief for armorers when you can, if there are issues with the handgun maintenance issues, when you can just take out the entirety of that trigger control group and place it into another frame. Or if I need a different frame in general, because maybe the frame's cracked, or I need a different platform, I can take the trigger control group out of one firearm, one M17, and I can place it into something else. That modularity is what pushed the U.S. military to go with SIG, in addition to a couple other little features, mainly that the SIG line incorporated a safety into it as well, while the Glock 19X did not incorporate a safety. And one of the big pushbacks on that from against Glock with the 19X, and why the military didn't go with that, was that the Glock 19X had to be third-party sourced out in order to install a safety mechanism, in which that was going to up the cost per unit to $150 on top of the base price that the military would have been charged for the Glock 19X. Now, that little bit of history out of the way, why am I going to compare this to the Echelon? They're two different handguns, okay? Well, there's a lot that they're doing very similar internally. Yes, they're both polymer frame, striker-fired handguns, okay? And they're both trying to tackle the same market, which is going to be military law enforcement and enthusiasts, of course, as well. And so a lot of the internals actually have a lot of similarities. Mainly is that the Croatian company that is producing the Echelon and thus importing it, or rather Springfield importing it into the US, they're having a removable trigger group as well. Although they're calling theirs I believe the central operating group, which then can be, just like the SIG, removed from one frame and placed into another, making things easier for armorers or for changing the platform in general of the Echelon. Okay, so here we are on the range. So the first thing we're going to cover, let's look at the P320 and look at SIG and what's competing with the Echelon. So, and let's see if any of my opinions have changed on it. Again, this is the P320 Legion. And we'll just throw a few rounds out. So, my opinions thus far haven't changed. It's still a pretty good platform. It's a fun gun to shoot. The trigger is still probably my least liked portion of this. And I will say this, I feel like the gun still sits pretty high in the hand versus some of the other stuff that's coming on the market. The Echelon seems like it sits just a little bit lower. And it might be just because of the height of the base plate of that and how the beaver tail sits. I will say this about the SIG. The beaver tail is a lot bigger. You can really get your hand high up into that. And there's definitely no concern about you getting slide by it or anything like that with it. So let's throw out a few more rounds.
It's not bad. I like Glocks better. To be honest, I like I have a P365. It's my concealed carry. It's actually...
All right, so here we have the Echelon, and we're going to fire the Echelon next and see how that just kind of stacks up and how it feels against it. I can already tell, I mean, just off the bat, I mean, you look at it, beaver tail is definitely not as robust as the P320s, but I don't know, if it's just me, it feels like this sits just a little bit lower in the hand. So let's throw out a few rounds. I think I like the trigger a lot more than the SIGs. I think I like how it sits in my hand just a little bit more, and it's a lot easier, at least for my hands, to drop that mag release and just literally yank that magazine out the base of that. Reloads on the SIG, you know, they're fine. I don't care for the shape and the design of the mag release on the P320. As my thumb comes down and hits it, it's just pretty plain. I really actually liked it on the Echelon. And actually, one big thing that I really liked on the Echelon compared to this is the positioning and the design of the slide release on it. And as you can see, with the P320, we have the standard paddle. You see this on Glock. You see this on a lot of other firearms. With the Echelon, it is this little lever that pops out the side. And the first time firing that, I didn't think I was gonna like that. However, the distance that it sticks out from the side, it was very intuitive. I really, really liked that. It was very simple. As I'm in the position of firing, as I'm bringing my hand up to simply, and it feels faster on the slide drop than it does on, say, the SIG. It feels easier to, it's kind of weird to say that and talk about it like that in those terms, but just from firing it, that's how it kind of feels in my hand. The ergonomics feel better than SIGs. And
now the Echelon. Already I like that better. That actually was a lot easier to control than the SIG. My guess is it's like, yeah, because you're able to grip it so much higher. It's a lot easier to control and bring it back down.
It felt like way less muzzle whip.
Oh yeah, way less. And I didn't think I would like it, but I really like this. Lever release.
It sounds like a stupid comparison. But
yeah, it digs into your finger more, which is actually nice.
It's super easy to find. I mean, if you think like, okay, if I got hands covered in water, mud, blood, whatever, like tapping that thing, and it's just a tap, and that slide drops down. No problem.
Yeah.
It feels designed to be faster.
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely faster.
I'm gonna give it to the Croatians, man. They made a pretty good platform.
Yeah, no, it's nice. I like it a lot.
Now I mentioned that grip angle. We do a direct comparison. You can see with the P320 where that beaver tail starts and ends. The Echelon does sit higher in your hand. So that barrel is dropping significantly lower, giving you that lower bore access in compared to the P320. It sits a little bit lower, and it felt like, I mean, just slightly, I mean, not by a whole lot, but there was a little bit bit less muzzle whip with the Echelon than versus the P320. All right, so, you know, we're going to throw a few more rounds of the Echelon. I'm really enjoying this. Like I said, this is growing on me, dude. You know, my end thoughts on the Echelon versus the P320, you know, and that comparison. The P320 is great for what it does, sure. The Echelon is straight up copying the homework of the P320. We have the removable trigger group on the inside, the central operating group of what the Croatian company that's making this thing, that's what they're calling it. they took that homework, and instead of just like, oh, because they're cheating on the homework and they're not going to get, maybe they're bad students. Well, they're getting an A+. They're doing a better score than what SIG did. I think this is a superior platform to that SIG. Now, time will kind of tell as far as reliability and just getting more and more rounds to this thing. But so far, I've put about 400 to 500 rounds through this. And I've had no stoppages, I've had no stovepipes, I've had no jams, nothing. No issues thus far with it. So let's throw out the last few rounds on this.
In the end, between the SIG P320 and the Echelon, these two big competitors, I ultimately like the Echelon just a little bit more. And the big reason for that is probably going to be, first off, because of how much lower it sits in the hand. It has better recoil control than that SIG P320. The trigger, it triggers better out of the box than a SIG. SIG triggers feel like sponge cake to me when I'm shooting them. The reset on the Echelon is leaves a little bit to be desired, mainly because that reset is it's really light when you're letting off of it. But the trigger pull overall is much crisper than the SIG P320s. Between the two, I would spend my money on the Echelon. It's been running pretty well so far, and I've put about 400 to 500 rounds between each of the two handguns, and in the end, that 320 I think is, or excuse me, the Echelon in the end I think is the big winner overall between the two. So, but either of these handguns don't matter as much as the shooter behind that firearm. So go get training, go make yourself better educated, go make yourself a better informed shooter, and that's what's going to make you a better citizen and better able to defend your community and your family overall. And that's all you can really ask for. Stay prepared, not scared. Like and subscribe down below. God bless and good night.